thesis of your book is that, who's going to win, if there is a winner of the U.S. China geopolitical contest, is really going to be determined on the trade and economic policies that each country pursues. Maybe can you explain that a little bit?
Well, I think it's at the end of the day, the ultimate contest between United States and China will not take place in the military realm. So it doesn't matter how many aircraft carriers or stealth fighters you have. That's not going to determine the outcome. And as you know, the outcome similarly in the Cold War between United States and Soviet Union was determined by the size of the economy. And when the United States began to outspend Russia, Soviet Union, that's it. The war was over. So in the same way, I think the outcome of the contest between United States and China, if both sides, by the way, decide to carry on with this contest, I mean, they can decide to press the pause button, they can decide to coexist with each other, but if they decide to proceed with this contest, then I think there's no question that it's the economic game that is the #1 game.
There's one sentence that you have in here that jumped out at me, which you kind of referenced. You said, even after he leaves office, the next president will not be able to restore the trust in America that Trump has eroded. Now that we've got Trump out and we've got Biden in, it's been 100 days. Some of that is coming back. But do you think the United States is going to be able to get all the way back to where it was pre-Trump in the view of people outside of the country?
Well, a lot of it will depend at the end of the day on the domestic strength and vitality of American society. I mean, that's the most critical variable. Because American society has been the most successful society in human history. Let's be very clear about that. No other society has achieved as much as the United States of America has. No other society has accumulated as much power as the United States has. And no other society projected the kind of political stability and continuity that the United States had for over at least over 200 years or so. But what's different is the shock that Trump gave is that the rest of the world said, this cannot happen in America, to have such an erratic, unpredictable president who's actually almost systematically undermined several institutions of the United States, which was supposed to be the great strength of the United States. And I can tell you that when you talk to serious people, in fact, some of them have said so openly, Martin Wolf of the Financial Times has said so openly, it is conceivable that the Biden administration may be a pleasant interlude between two Trump administrations. And I think everyone sees that cloud over the horizon.
That the U.S. is still going to have a kind of a three-pronged approach. It's going to, compete with China. Let's compete with China on 5G. Let's compete with China on development in Southeast Asia and across Asia. So let's compete where we can compete, and then let's cooperate where we can cooperate. And of course, you mentioned climate is the #1 example, and pandemics would be the second. But the third is confront. And we are going to confront China where our values say we have to confront China. And both, Secretary Pompeo and Secretary Blinken have said a genocide is occurring by a stricter, broader definition of the word, that there's a genocide occurring in Xinjiang. We're going to put sanctions on Chinese cotton. We're going to put sanctions on Chinese tomatoes in the region, and we may expand it on to polysilicon and renewables and solar. So given that the United States is going to do that, how do you think China's going to react? Is China going to be able to work with the United States on those transnational problems while being confronted with the United States on human rights, which of course China says, this is our internal issues, don't lecture us?
Well, I mean, I know that Secretary of State Blinken has said that, right? Although he used the word compete, cooperate, and adversarial, I think. Is the word he used. But they see it's got to be clear where is the competition and where's the adversarial side. In a competition means You run a 100-meter race. The rules are clear. May the best man win. That's competition. Adversarial means you're running a 100-meter race, and I'm going to trip you while you run the race. Right? And clearly, you obviously, when you start the race and if you're not sure whether this is competition or adversarial, then you create a potential for great misunderstanding. You may actually not intend to say, hey, I'm going to take an adversarial attitude towards you. Say, for example, on economic competition, right? May the best economy win. But if you try to, in a sense, undermine the economy in some way or another, that's not competition. That's different. You see, so you make drawing lines, clear lines, having clarity about where you can work together, where you cannot work together, and it's okay. In some areas, it's okay to compete. For example, as you know, United States and Soviet Union competed in outer space, right? The Soviets sent Yuri Gagarin, you sent a man to the moon, but you didn't try and shoot down Yuri Gagarin. You know what I mean? So let's be clear. If it's competition, what are the rules of the competition and what's adversarial? Then we have clarity on that, because you don't want to end up them being a complete misunderstanding between the two sides. So if both sides actually, frankly, can spend more time talking to each other, that would be wonderful. And at the end of the day, you know, as someone who's been a diplomat for 33 years, I always emphasize that diplomacy has been around for 2,000 years or more. Okay? And let's go back to the art of diplomacy. This is obviously a very difficult, intractable geopolitical challenge. Let's use the word diplomacy. I would add that to your, cooperate, compete, confront, but also use diplomacy.
Yeah, but you need to give me a synonym for diplomacy that starts with C, or else the alliteration is gone.
Mr. Mahbubani, I'm a U.S. citizen. Would you agree that China is beginning to become a big bully? And in your opinion, why should the rest of the world kowtow to China?
I got news for you, Roshi.
Sure.
All great powers are bullies. And the idea, I don't understand why people keep talking of benevolent great powers. The term benevolent great powers is an oxymoron. And by the way, don't make me the source of, let's say, if you want to find out whether the United States is the bully, talk to anyone in Latin America. And if you look at what Graham Allison wrote in his book, another book written on U.S. China relations is by Graham Allison. It's called Destined for War. And one of the passages which I cite, I think in chapter 1, Steve, Graham Allison says that, we Americans, we keep wishing that China would become like America. He says, please be careful what you're wishing for. Because China today is, in terms of its development, in the same place where United States was in 1890, when Teddy Roosevelt emerged. And he said, once America became the #1 power, what did the United States do? Declare war on the Philippines, seize Guam, seize the Philippines, and then kick the British and German navies out and take over Venezuela, seize Panama, and he went on. So great powers, all great powers are bullies, and let's be very clear about that. But the question is how you restrain them, and that's what all the neighbors in China are worried about. And actually, we want to find ways and means of restraining China and make sure it doesn't become a great bully. But in diplomacy, you don't. It's not a binary choice.
Sure.
It's not either you confront or kowtow. And in fact, the best wisdom about how to manage China comes from a country called Vietnam. The one country actually that knows China very well is Vietnam, because Vietnam and China have a relationship going back 2,000 years. And Vietnam was occupied by China only for 1,000 years. And so the Vietnamese have worked out a piece of wisdom. They say that to be a leader of Vietnam, you must be able to stand up to China. And You must be able to get along with China. If you can't do both, you cannot be a leader of Vietnam. So the choice is not kowtow or confront. The choice is you've got to do both. You've got to stand up and you have to get along.
Great. Thank you.
I'm going to, all right, Hoshi, I'm following up on your question.
Please do.
I got to get my American flag you see behind me. But I mean, Kishore, look at what China's done in the past few years. It has become much more aggressive in the South China Sea. It is not following international law there. Certainly, it's becoming much more aggressive towards Taiwan with the air incursions. It's gone into Hong Kong, and basically Hong Kong is now any other Chinese city, Beijing, Shanghai. It is not that special administrative region. It has become much more aggressive in India. So I mean, I certainly would make the case China is becoming more aggressive, if not being a bully right now. Why do you think China's doing that? And do you think it's in China's interest to be doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I characterizing it wrong? Which happy to take that as
No,
an option too.
no. Again, it's a choice of language, and I actually did write a column on this. That there is a huge difference in meaning between two English words. One is aggressive. Aggressive actually means you use physical force, okay? And assertive. And I would say China has become assertive, but not yet aggressive. And I tell you one point that Graham Allison would agree with me is that, let's say if Teddy Roosevelt was the leader of China today, you know what's the first thing he would do? He says, why are all these pipsqueak countries like Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, they control more islands in the South China Sea than China do? I'm going to take them all over. And actually, to be honest with you, it's surprising that China hasn't done that yet. That's how great powers will behave. So you're right, they are becoming more assertive, no question. I mean, you can't expect a China in the year 2001, the U.S. GNP was 8 times the size of China. Now, when you're 1/8 the size, you behave in a certain way, right? You don't go and kick a guy who's 8 times your size. But when you're 1.5 times, your behavior changes. And so when any great power will assert itself and certainly in its neighborhood, but of course in each area you got to look at it carefully and understand what they're trying to do. Now in the case of the international law, it is a fact, by the way, that all great powers, if they will abide by international law when they don't have to sacrifice their interests, but if they have to choose between interest and international law, they will choose their interest. And what's interesting is that more recently, the World Court has passed a judgment saying that United States and UK should return Diego Garcia to Mauritius, which was taken from Mauritius. And you know and I know the United States won't do it, right? Even though the World Court has said so. But I'm not surprised. I mean, nobody expects the United States to give up Diego Garcia because the World Court says you should do so. So all great powers behave that way. So it's all about how great powers behave relative to how badly they could be or how well they could be. And I think that the countries in Southeast Asia have absolutely no illusion that a much bigger, more powerful China will be a real challenge to deal with. And by the way, China can bully in so many more ways. It doesn't even have to use any ships or weapons and so on and so forth. It can find ways and means of asserting its power. And that's what and that's exactly why the countries in Southeast Asia actually want to see an understanding between the United States and China, an agreement on rules that both will abide by, and that creates a more stable world for us.
Now, it's been a year since I read your book, and from what I recall, you gave some ideas on how U.S. can modify its domestic strategies and adjust how it perceives China. Good stuff. But I don't recall much of the book delving deeply into China's challenges. I mean, like most of Asia, there's the aging problem, and that's one. And with the increasing migration of supply chains out of China, how will CCP sustain China's growth and prosperity? That's two. And to add on top of those two, there's the defiance. You guys mentioned Taiwan. That's the defiance of Hong Kong and Taiwan towards mainland Chinese rule. So could you shed some light on how China could mitigate some of its own challenges, please? Thank you.
Yeah, very, very good question. And you're absolutely right, really. I think if I had to choose between being president of the United States and president of China, I still think being president of the United States is an easier job than being president of China. And China has got massive challenges. In fact, just in China, every normal day is a massive challenge, because keeping 1.4 billion people together every day in a relatively harmonious environment domestically is a huge, huge challenge. And I do discuss, I think in one chapter, if I'm not mistaken, I think the chapter is called something like, should China become a democracy, something like that. And China has got lots of internal challenges. And that the reason I say that with confidence, the reason why China is very reluctant to get involved in any major wars outside is precisely because it wants to focus on its domestic challenges that it has to deal with. And you mentioned, I think, aging population, that is one of them. How you keep growth going, you mentioned that it's another one of them. But on the other side, let me add that as of now, if you look at the next at least 10 years, I think China's economy is going to continue to do very well because of all the investments that we made. I will give one piece of data just to indicate how well China is doing. The size of the retail goods market in China in 2009 was $1.8 trillion. And United States was $4 trillion, more than double that of China's in 2009. 10 years later, 2019, and I always say 2019 is a significant year because, Steve, this is 3 years after the trade war, right? The United States beat down the Chinese economy, flattened it, and the result was that the Chinese retail goods market went from 1.8 trillion to 6 trillion, went up 3 times in 10 years. And the United States only went up from 4 trillion to 5.5 trillion. So the Chinese are obviously doing something right on the economic front. And the one advantage that the Chinese have really is that they have one of the world's best quality of mind in government that is looking at all these issues and dealing with them. So yes, China has a lot of challenges, but I would say the capacity for China to deal with these challenges is much, much greater.
And by the book, I think it's chapter 6, Should China Become Democratic? Right? That's the chapter where Kishore goes over all of that.